Here we are, December 29th, 2024. We are at our last official broadcast of 2024 for Awaken Your Inner Genius. Welcome, everyone. And we understand that many around the world have been celebrating their holidays this week and going into a New Year's celebration. I want to say thank you and welcome to our panel this evening. We have Jim Porter, Ken Pearson, and Karen Elkins, and myself, Kimberly Faith, all dedicated Russell students. Jim at 50 years, Ken at 30 years, and I am only at 3 years, and Karen is the first time through the home study course, but has been studying the Russell work for a while. But before we actually begin and dive into the last lesson of Unit 7 here, why don't we do what we normally do and just tune in for just a moment, a quiet moment here at the end of the year. Tune into the universal heartbeat of the ocean. But this time, I ask you to tune in to your heart and whatever needs to be left behind here in 2024. Whatever needs to be let go, you'll breathe deeply in, breathe out, and invite in what you are looking for and hoping for 2024. We lift up the world. Tune into this beautiful sunset gifted to us by God. Right there. Watching the waves. And just becoming very present here in this moment. Welcome to all of our listeners. You'll relax as you come back to us. A gracious thank you to all. And so let's just remind everybody where we are here. Panel, we've been at this for 7 months. Isn't that incredible?
Yep.
Hard to believe that. 7 months, and then we were there for longer before that, and we were doing all of our practice. So here we are at the end of Unit 7. So remember that we're going through the home study course. I'd like you to take a look at the slide here. Going through the home study course, we are here at lesson 28, which is the Q&A. There is a Q&A to students' questions there at the end of every single unit. And want to remind everyone what this broadcast is based on. It is based on the works of Walter and Leo Russell and based on this quote. And if you would, Karen, please read this quote for our audience.
Mediocrity is self-inflicted, but genius is self-bestowed.
One of my favorite quotes, it was about Walter Russell when I first found the works of Walter and Leo Russell just a few years ago. So as we begin, I want to ask just each of the panelists, if you would, just give me one thought when you are preparing. We all prepare a few days before the broadcast, and Ken and I dedicate all of Sundays to getting ready for the broadcast here. And so it's knee deep in the lesson. I'm just curious if you could sum up for just 1 or 2 sentences. What was one of your biggest takeaways from this lesson?
Okay.
Jim?
Go ahead, Karen.
No, I was just going to say this was totally a lesson on natural law and the philosophy of don't expect, if you've done your deeds wrong, there is cause and effect for everything. And he'll work with you, but don't always ask for the override.
Okay. A precursor of what's to come. Jim, what was your summary of this lesson?
Pretty much the same thing, that a reminder that while in body, we must use that body to manifest the things that we want here. Just that's how we got here, manifesting this, but it took work. I remember falling when I was trying to learn how to walk. I really don't. But yeah, there's effort that you have to put into getting through each stage of growth. And that's true of anything that you want to manifest in life. There's effort you have to put forward.
There is effort. All right, Ken, your thought before I share mine?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that I get out of this lesson is if I have a mental problem, an energy problem, or something internal going on, it's going to take a mental rebalancing. And if I have a physical ailment or a physical problem, then it's going to take a physical action to solve that or resolve that. So there's 2 kinds of actions, the mental and then the physical one. And that's what I think we'll get from this lesson.
For me, when I was looking at the lesson, I was really recalibrating. Do you remember that this was all written back in the during the 1950s when Walter and Leo published this? So what year was it published, Jim?
1951.
And so I was thinking back to the kinds of questions that people asked back then and how many of these questions would be some that are even asked today, which shows you how timeless the work is, but also shows you the journey that human beings are on, that there's still so much for us to learn. So I want to say welcome to all of our TikTok watchers, our YouTube watchers. Hello, Linda. Hello, Bonnie, and welcome everyone. And for those of you watching now in the future, remember that it is timeless. So let's go ahead and dive in here tonight. And let's take a look. I did have to chuckle right out of the box when we started this because it said right there at the beginning, so many questions have come to us from various sources, which are so unlike the workings of natural law and God's way of working that they might appropriately belong to the Middle Ages. I didn't think they minced any words there. What you think?
No. Because we're still in the pagan barbarian stage of humanity, which we were during the Middle Ages, during the Roman Empire, during the Greek Empire, during all of them. We haven't evolved beyond that for the most part. So yes, we're still living by superstition and desires for miraculous things long before we're capable of manifesting such things. Someone at the peak of the mountain, like a high illuminate or a Christ, yes, they can begin to manifest things at will. But the rest of us have to use these to make it happen.
Yeah, well, I can't wait for that day, Jim. I'm just saying. So it goes on to say in the yellow highlighted there, it says, people who are rational and wise about many things of life seem to lose all their rationality and reason when it comes to the matters of interpreting God's ways. And so if you'll skip down to the top of 548, I had a question here. It says, many of these questioners sincerely believe that if many sincere and devout people pray long enough and with sufficient intensity, they can induce God to do something for them which he otherwise would not do, even to reversing his laws as special favors in recognition of their devotion. Now, I found that rather amusing because, you know, I've explained to you all that I was raised in the South. And so I have witnessed this a lot, that if there are enough people that pray, that it seems like the more prayer, the more there would be a reaction. And so I never really thought about that we were trying to induce God. But I thought that was a very interesting way to put it. Ken?
Yeah, you know, I mean, I would contend that that's really true. If you think about how many times people have gotten together, and as a matter of fact, that started around wars. And churches believe that the greater the congregation, the greater the power of the prayer. And how many wars have been stopped by congregations of thousands and thousands? I think 10,000 was the number that got together to do praying to stop the war. But World War II did not get stopped by prayer. Man, and that's what, again, going back into that. Remember, God didn't create the wars, man did, and God's not going to undo what man has himself created.
So, Jim, if you would, read the highlighted section in yellow when it was talking about the real law of nature. The real law of nature.
The real law of nature, by means of which they can change their own depolarizing body by a joyous polarizing thought, proving that the truth is always more wonderful than the most picturesque. Is that picturesque? Wow. Picturesque on truth, even though not so spectacular. Look, this is the thing you don't want to let go of, is that a positive thought and action, thought and action can manifest profound changes in a person. When I was in the military, and I'll keep this very short, at a young age in basic training, there was a young man that showed up there, and he had a very traumatic experience. And he was in our barracks, literally watched this man who had jet black hair, his hair go white overnight. That's how much it affected his body. So yes, things can happen to your detriment or to your benefit by thoughts and fears.
Well, I wanted to open it up for a commentary, though, because I found this language of depolarizing body by a joyous polarizing thought. So let's talk about this depolarizing and polarizing. Mm-hmm. Ken, can you offer some insight? And then I'll ask Karen to comment, because most people don't understand the idea of polarity at all. I teach this quite a bit in corporate. So people, what does it mean to be depolarizing and then polarizing?
Well, polarized is to be impacted heavily on your senses. An overload of senses is a polarization, and depolarization would be the opposite, for it to feel numb, to not feel affected by it. So when something is polarized, like in the media world, when you're doing commercials and such, when something polarizes the audience, it isn't necessarily good because it's too polarizing, right? It can be polarizing. But what this is illustrating is how one polarized thought can change the polarity of your whole body. So if you're low and you think about the people you love, generally you're going to immediately feel a healing, immediately start to feel a little bit of surge of energy, as opposed to if you think about the people you dislike and what they're doing wrong and how they've mistreated you, it will depolarize your body. So rather than polarization could be looked at as a charge, and depolarization would be looked at as a discharge.
All right, so let's say that one more time. Polarization is a charge, and depolarization is not a charge.
Discharge.
Is a discharge. Okay. All right. Karen, anything you want to add before I have us continue? Because I thought there's a very interesting sentence.
Two poles, and as we come into this drop of water to make our own bodies, we are literally coming in. That's the plus. And as we discharge and age, we're going out. It's another way of looking at it. You can look at it. The earth is the crown, accepts all the energy, and then it discharges at the bottom. So that's one pole.
See that in a torus field is what you're saying, like in a torus field.
You look at it as two different poles. One's a positive. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to bring out this next highlighted sentence, and I can just read it there. It just says, because I wanted to encourage everyone who's been following us here. We hear from a lot of people in between the sessions, and so thank you for reaching out. It says, we look to you who are ready for cosmic knowing to become the seed for spreading the light of cosmic awareness to all mankind. So I wanted to ask the panel, what would you say to someone who is newly watching this broadcast, perhaps someone hasn't really heard of the Russells, or they've been hearing only through the broadcast? That's quite a inspirational statement, saying we look to you who are ready for cosmic knowing. What would you say to a new person seeking this kind of knowledge?
Well, I would say the very fact that they are drawn to what the written word here and what we're sharing shows that they're ready for this knowledge. And what Ken said and what Karen said also is the polarization or depolarization of every thought and action creates who you are and what you accomplish or don't accomplish. And the key word for me, and I drive people crazy with it, and I'm going to continue to, is forgiveness. The way you get past the negative depolarizing thoughts is to forgive. Forgive those that do trespass against you. Let it go. Don't hold on it. Don't dwell on it. You're not going to change them. It doesn't mean that they're going to forgive you or they're not going to continue to try to harm you. But your being angry or is destructive at what's happening to you is destructive to you, not them.
So, and we're going to talk about how that actually ties into the alkalinity and the acidicness of the body, because this has a real physical effect. Karen?
No, it's exactly what was Ken and I were saying before. It ties in exactly with Jim. That is still a discharge of energy. Yes. By letting go, and the forgiveness is a discharge. You're not holding on to a charge that holds and stays steadfast in your body. And interestingly enough, as your body is 99.9 water in molecular level, water holds memory. So when you discharge, your body is basically your own alchemical instrument. So what you choose to do.
Right. Well, a quick example is when I was a child and I touched something hot and I pulled away and it was a bad experience. I didn't hate the hot thing. I just decided I'm not going to do that anymore. So you don't hold anger at the subject of that which causes you discomfort or harm. You let that go and you move on with your life. Now, I'm sorry, but I know I can hear people out there. You don't understand the bastard I live with. I kind of do. I've had some of those people in my life, and the only thing you can do in life is remove yourself from their influence to the best of your ability, and it can be difficult. Last thing, I watched my mother back in the 1950s leave her home. This is when women didn't have a job down the street, with 5 children, to get away from my father, who was a negative, harmful man. That was a decision that was very hard for her to make. But sometimes You simply have to trust and get out of a bad situation, even though you don't know where you're going.
All right, so Ken, keeping us on track here, if you could read that's the sentences that are underlined right there at the end of
Can you
page.
do me a favor? Can you make sure you would make the page number and the paragraph place, please?
I was getting ready to
got my
go there.
own unit. I can't
Five-
quite see the reading because it's so fine print. I would need a
Okay,
zoom
so
in.
I'll do the reading then. 548, bottom of 548. You would not expect to write a story, compose a symphony, or solve a problem in mathematics upon faith and belief, unsupported by knowledge. Yet countless prayers go up to God with the hope that faith and belief without intelligent action, based upon knowledge, will bring fulfillment of desires. That next paragraph, Ken, I thought was pertinent about walking. Can you share that one? Top
Yeah.
of page 549.
You do not have faith and belief that you can walk, as Jim had stated. You know that you can walk. You also know that you can do anything by acquiring the knowledge of how to do it through action. Yet, many who lack knowledge to do what they desire to do depend on faith and belief that God will do it for them. God will not do it for them, He will do it only with them. And I think the greatest example of that I have in my life, sharing on that paragraph, would be, I'm a writer, so I have had many concept of ideas and screenplays and so forth. And then at the same time, I have produced a golf invention. And in that golf invention, it was a desire to know how to do something, and it was specific to golf. And I had desire to figure out how to make this particular move. And it wasn't a flash of an instant that the idea of how to do it and what mechanism would help me do it, quite frankly, it was a piece of rope at the time, which would prove whether I had conceived it correctly. As soon as I tied a piece of rope around myself and used it in the manner in which the idea came to it, I knew I had something. It took me 2 years of physical action to put together the proper materials. And had I not taken that physical action, it was a great concept. I got a utility patent on it. It was an original idea. So, and I brought it to the networks. I aired it on TV. I endorsed John Daly. I had all those things happen, but none of those things would have happened had I not followed the inspired idea with a physical action.
All right, so that's talking about working with God, not for, not asking, not God to do it for you, but working with them. So let's go into this great misconception of prayer, because they took time to do this, and I just wanted to anchor us here where the blue brackets are. And it says the practically every prayer which carries with it the request also carries with it an inference that God is overlooking something in the management of His universe and needs a reminder that things are not running smoothly enough to suit the petitioner. That one made me laugh. Also, they carry the inference that requests are asked as a personal favor from reverent and devout believers who believe such favors will be granted if enough devout and reverent people join the weight of their petitions together to be heard by God, and his interest in their personal request is sufficiently aroused. So as they go to the bottom of that particular page, it says that bottom paragraph, Ken, if you would, it says, to those we say that God does His part. Can you just read that last paragraph, and then we'll have a comment, and then I'll ask Jim to comment.
To those we say that God does His part always and needs no reminder. His part of creation is perfect. His law is perfect. His law always works. You do not have to ask God to make His law of gravitation work. Neither will He set it aside if you ask Him to. If you fall off a cliff, the law of gravitation will cause your death. Whether you are a saint or a sinner, and no prayer will set aside, God will tell you not to fall, as He had told you in that He has told you that in your very seed. But if you disobey, you will perish.
All right. So I wanted to ask the people who are listening here today. It talks about how God's whole universe is in perfect balance. He keeps it so. You may depend upon it always. If you want good crops, God's law is there to give them to you if you work with His law. Now, for those of you that are new, please understand that they talk about Mother, Father, God. They default to His because that's just simply the easier pronoun here. But if you ask God to do your part of the work as well as His, you will harvest nothing, no matter how great your faith. And so I just wanted to ask the panelists, that's a lesson that you learn in this human journey. And that's what Ken was referring to, is that it isn't just enough to have faith. So I started the company many years ago when I was with my daughter when she was young. It was called Sassy Tales, and it was an accessory company for girls. I had licenses from Warner Brothers and from Disney. And I learned a very valuable lesson because my faith in the idea was huge, absolutely huge. So that was in effect polarizing. If I'm hearing you all say it. So I had tons of positive faith, but the problem was is I had as much fear as I had faith. So I was depolarizing at all of the negativity that I was literally negating all of my positive energy. And both when you think about, and so I just wanted to ask everybody to comment there in the chat box. Have you ever been at a point in your life where you wondered why something wasn't working because your faith wasn't strong enough, when in fact, when you look at it within this context of a law, you all of a sudden go, oh, okay. I was depolarizing even as I was polarizing, and I could not outwit that. Does that resonate, team?
Yeah, I think Mark Twain said it best when he said, writing or creating is 2% inspiration and 98% perspiration. And that is, I think, what we forget. If I have a great idea, oh my God, it should happen, should come to fruition. I got the greatest idea, this should come. But if I don't take action to manifest that idea, there have been many brilliant ideas that never came to fruition because they failed to take the action to fulfill it.
Just a correction here, real quick. That was actually Edison that said that, not Twain.
No, it was Mark Twain.
All right, well,
but
we'll look it up.
Yes.
All right, we'll look at it. We'll have a little bit of Resilient bingo.
Later, I'm almost positive.
Have a little bit of Resilient bingo between our folks. They'll go find exactly where it is. But I want to add to it. It isn't simply just the intelligent action. It's also managing all of those energies of the polarizing and the depolarizing, because I had plenty of action with that particular initiative. I mean, I had found investors, we had launched, we were in 1,000 stores. I had plenty of action, but my depolarizing thoughts and my negative thoughts were literally, it was like I was running on a treadmill.
It's called keeping your eye on the goal. So as you seek to achieve your goal, there's going to be things that will stand in your way. And they will bring you to a halt. And if you latch on to the things that are standing in your way instead of the goal, to that degree, you are slowed. And the Russells talk about it. And I think Leo goes into deep discussion of this, and God will work with you, but not for you, how that you need to build momentum. As you start to really move in toward that which you're desiring to manifest, your momentum builds up. And things that would have stopped you in your tracks in the beginning of that journey are now just blown out of the way. But the key is hold true to your vision, no matter what. And, of course, it's easy to say.
I think that's where Deb Tunkin is saying we need to look at our underlying beliefs and counter actions, which is what Ken was mentioning before.
Yes.
And that has to do with what are those issues that when you're in childhood, and what are your fears and where do they come from? And so I think part of you creating or things not manifesting are some of the lessons that we need to learn to be aware about ourselves. And they're part of the journey.
Yes.
They are part of the journey. And so, I mean, I ended up losing everything during that particular area. I had a wonderful few years, but at the end of it, I ended up having to declare bankruptcy personally, professionally. I mean, my life just went so it was a very important experience for me. I later learned that it was of great value, and that being the best thing that ever happened to me, because learning what the difference was between polarizing and depolarizing energies there it was one step further. So I bring this up because the issue of balance was so prevalent here in this lesson. On the bottom of page 550, Ken, I was wondering if you could read that last underlined paragraph, because it's talking about balance.
Yes, absolutely. Jim, you're correct. It was Edison. I was wrong. Let's not talk any further about that.
Okay.
The restoration of balance through any mental unbalanced condition is purely mental. A change of thought from negative to positive will cure any mental ailment. A physical unbalanced body condition, however, requires a physical action to restore its balance, which we've kind of stated. Do you want me to go further or there?
Go on. Yeah, go on to that next paragraph on page 551, the top one.
Okay. A mind healing has no relation whatsoever to faith and belief. It is purely cause and effect, working in accordance with God's established law. It is desire for a right condition followed by intelligent action to restore that condition. Purely physical abnormalities, I'll just finish this up, whether a broken bone, a cancer, a cut upon the head, a gunshot wound, paralysis from blood clots on the brain, misshapen bodies, or other deformities can be cured only by a physical action. One might just as well ask God in all faith and belief to mend a broken spoke in an automobile wheel as to ask him to cure a deformed foot without intelligent action.
We've got,
Okay.
it would, Kimberly, we've got Rita here is making a good comment, and I do like Neville Goddard. I am
Please,
reminded.
let's read that.
Yeah, I am reminded of a quote from Neville Goddard. Man's faith in God is measured by the confidence in himself. Does that echo what you are saying?
Yes. That's
Yeah,
nice.
yeah.
Confidence
All right.
is a good word.
hmm
Let me jump in and show you. Give
Faith without works is dead.
Suppose my cousin John and I, when we were working at the palace, decided to go home to Pennsylvania. We were in Virginia. We got on 64 and we went in the wrong direction. We went in the wrong direction for nearly 50 miles, at which point we realized we were going in the wrong direction. Now, we could have cried the blues, gotten out of the car and just died. But what we did is we looked at the situation. Okay, we've got to turn around and go back. So 100 miles into our trip, we were right where we started from. This is what life is.
Been there, done that.
Yes, and sometimes you go in the wrong direction, and once you realize you still have got to undo that which was incorrect, and to be angry about it or resentful about it, or as I've done many times in my life, shake your fist at Creator, which you're really shaking your fist at yourself, and you're asking your body self is asking your God self to change universal law for you. Because why? Because you're special. No, you're not. Undo the damage, repair the thing, forgive yourself, forgive others, move forward towards your goal.
So, Jim, I got a question. Is shaking my fist the same as shaking my finger when I shake it at you, or is it two different things?
It's close enough. The fist is more powerful.
So, well, this dives into cause and effect then. This over on the bottom of page 551. So cause and effect, it says creation is a play. So if anybody who's listening right now, if you would type into the chat box, creation is a play. Creation is a play of cause and effect. The cause is undivided. Cause is always balanced. It is always one. Effect is divided. Instead of one balanced condition, it is a division into two unbalanced conditions. So that's a pretty loaded statement there. I'm going to ask Jim and Ken to comment there because so I understand the creation is a play of cause and effect. So dive into the first one. Cause is undivided. What does that mean?
It means anything that is desired is done in cause. It's complete. It's whole. It's the source of all action reaction. An example I would use if a baseball player got up to the bat and he's hitting 250 or whatever is considered a lot of hits, even he knows that he's going to swing and go and be called out from time to time. It's getting back up to bat that builds that record of success and momentum for yourself. It's just
Okay.
You know what's going through my head. I've got to get it out and drive you guys crazy. I keep hearing that
It's
song.
the end of 2024, Jim. That's okay. Yeah. We're all run out of energy here.
I keep hearing that song from, I think it was the 1970s or 80s. Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes Benz? My friends all have Porsches and I must make amends. That's what negative wasted prayer is. Asking for something, asking God to give you something, manifest you something physical without you doing the work for it.
Okay.
I think you could parallel with what we're doing actually in this whole course. And that is at moments you're going to recognize as you continue to study and contemplate this course, you're going to begin to recognize that you're growing, you're evolving, you're seeing more, you're hearing more. And that will be the cause, which is undivided because you're living a philosophy, you're studying a philosophy. But yet there are many pages and many lines and many principles, and you won't be able to recognize which principle or which page manifest that transformation, but you know you're transforming. So the cause is singular. The effect is all the pages and words and principles that I've applied, right? Remember, if you don't apply these principles, they don't mean anything. If you don't bring them to life in your own life, then you're just reading words and you're repeating them and spitting them out, but they have no meaning until you apply them to your mind in the moment you're in, followed by action, which we're talking about. So it's a balanced mind followed by balanced action. So, but as you see this growth and transformation, you're going to be like, God, I see the world in a whole different light. And you will not find the one singular thing other than the philosophy, this new way of life that taught you that. So therefore that's cause, which is singular, and effect is, again, all those pages and principles within.
Okay, so before we end up taking our first break, I want to dive into the next few sentences though, and I want to compare it to the seesaw here. It says the play of life is to keep the two unbalanced conditions of effect and balance with each other. When cause and effect are in balance with each other, the spiritual and the physical manifestation of either man or nature manifest harmony, unity, growth, and normalcy in all its parts. It's impossible to keep one's body in perfect balance always. Okay, so let's pause for just a minute. So we're in this cosmic play of cause and effect. So when we come down here, we this is the fulcrum, right, Jim? And that we have these two. Is it cause and effect on each side of these? And this is what we're trying to keep.
Yes, that's the two strong arms that they talk about.
So that's why when we talk about it's, when you hear others and other spiritual faiths, they'll talk about its duality.
I mean, we're talking about. There. I'm sorry, I hate to do this, but the fulcrum is cause. The lever is effect.
Okay, so this is cause.
To say that at the end. The cause is the fulcrum.
This is cause.
Singular, right? And that's undivided.
So effect here is the physical and the spiritual, right?
There you go.
The sensing and the knowing. It's all of the duality that we're dealing with. So the cause is the fulcrum right here. And then we come out here and we and I are in effect playing cosmic seesaw for this lifetime. Is that
think about
layman's way to say it?
Yes.
Yes, very good. If you took the fulcrum away, the seesaw would cease to move.
Right. And the fulcrum is always still. So that's what's real important. This is why. So just tell any of you that ever came, any of you that have come to the Russell Experience sessions that I did here at the museum, that was my gift to the museum a few years ago. That's how I met Karen. And that's actually ended up how I met Jim there. But I had these little seesaws because I literally built a human-sized seesaw that's here in the museum. If I could bring you all in there, because here's what we discovered. So as we get ready to go and break, is that if we stay just on the physical side, then we get very much into our sensed body and we lose touch. If we stay just on our spiritual side, we're very much into the knowing, but we've all met those people who are way, way out there woo-woo spiritual, but they're not grounded in reality. They're like, I'm not going to do the reality because somehow God. Pardon?
They're not producing anything.
Right. So we've all learned here. So I find that even if you were at a children's playground, if you will meditate on this concept here and make notes in your home study course here on page 551, if you get this, that this is what we're after, because when we do, we have a balance of the physical, a balance of the spiritual, a balance of time inside, a balance of time with nature. I mean, if you begin to live your life balanced, we all remember those kids at the playground, the one who wants to be at the bottom and make you be up here. That's very scary. All right. And then remember, we used to try to have two kids that would balance out a heavy kid. Okay. So we'd have to try to balance it. And then we'd have the kid who wasn't heavy enough that it would just go. It was no fun to be on a seesaw by yourself. Right.
I always had the big kids sit on it and jump off of it while I was at the top.
That's right.
Hit the ground.
And go crash. Okay. So I'm leaving this visual here as we take our first break. And this is what we do for those of you that are new. We take a quick 3-minute break every 30 minutes to give you a chance to stand up, decentrate, and get your brain ready for what we're coming back to, your brain and your heart. 2 and 3. All right. If you're within earshot, please come back. And I'd like to ask James to leave the quote on the screen here. And I want to just bring this up. We're getting ready to come to this quote. Very powerful. Jim, if you would read that quote out loud. You're on mute, Jim. Go ahead. Anytime we come back from break, it automatically does that. All right. So he's working on go ahead, Jim.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
You must lose your idea of separateness and find your universality. Until you know your oneness with the universe, you are but part of it. That's
all right. So this is important as we're getting ready to go into a little bit more here. That's coming up on just a few pages. I want to bring up Bonnie's comment. Karen, if you would share with us what Bonnie had to say. Certainly a lot of wisdom here.
I'm looking for where Bonnie is. There she is. The course means to have balance in everything I am doing. If I'm creating, I don't expect everything spectacular unless I've been putting out good juju vibes in the other areas of my life.
I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. I used to be so conflicted when I would go to a church and I would hear all about love and harmony, and then I would hear people walk out after lunch and they would be talking mean and gossiping about the people who were at church. And I remember thinking, always being very confused by that. How can we be saying love and harmony in one thing and talking so badly about others on the other hand? So I know this is something that we all struggle with in this particular reality. We have a question here from Deborah. If energy precedes form, can changing the quality of the energy also change the form accordingly? Ken?
100%.
Okay.
Tell me
Energy,
more. Remember, energy is another way of saying idea. So if you change the idea, you change the form rather than the energy.
Okay.
Energy is a little vague, but energy, there's no energy in matter. The energy is in idea, which precedes matter.
And we got to remember those particles arrange and rearrange, and that's all we're doing. Everything that is energy is particles, and particles arrange and rearrange all the time.
Can you pull the seesaw up again real quick?
Absolutely.
Right.
I have, just by the way, anybody who wants their own seesaw, all you have to do is go to Amazon and look up Dollhouse Seesaw, and you too can have your very own seesaw.
All right, you're holding your fingers at the fulcrum. That is divinity. That's the true you. Okay. Now, while in body, I'm sitting on the one side and it's down. Right. Now, what you do when you pray to God, fulcrum, to give you something. In this case, let's say I'm praying to God, will you go sit on the other side of this thing and lift me up? That means the fulcrum would go to that end and it would still be impossible for you to be lifted. So no matter where you place the fulcrum, God, you have to do the work. So you have to find someone of equal desire on the opposite side to help you manifest the work that you want to get done. And God's not going to move. You can move the fulcrum of God all over the place. It's not going to change your seesaw situation. You have to find the balance, embodied idea or person to manifest what you want.
So the adult size seesaw that I have here at the museum, hoping people can come to Waynesboro, Virginia and see it, is that we literally had people, you could move this seesaw and people were experimenting with all those things that you were just saying with Jim, how to keep balance. And that is the genesis of our human journey, because I had to chuckle here at the bottom of page 551. And this is why it's really helpful for us all to have a sense of humor. It is inconsistent for one to believe that God will set a broken bone and therefore refuse a surgeon's help, but will go to a dentist to have his teeth filled. So we are full of paradox as human beings. How many times can I tell you, I've said I battled with weight issues my entire life. I lost 100 pounds 18 years ago. That how many times I've gone to go get some kind of appetite suppressant from the doctor and then picked up a milkshake on the way home. Now, can you tell me that is the definition of insanity right there?
There you go.
I know I'm not the only one who has ever dealt with that kind of thing. So, all right. So when we and I want to go to the top of the next page here, if you would, Ken. I'm going to have you read that last sentence of the top paragraph. It says the seeds of fear.
Yes.
Page 552, top paragraph.
The seeds of fear, the last sentence.
Last sentence.
The seeds of fear, hate, and greed will not yield harvest of love, prosperity, happiness, and peace.
So before we go on to that next paragraph, wanted to invite everybody in the chat box here to just ask yourself, where are you when it comes to that? I mean, so when we are expecting a harvest of love, prosperity, happiness, and peace, are we sowing those seeds of fear, hate, and greed? And so I'm just curious about this paradox of being human. This is part of why we don't understand how we create the environments that we have. So going on to this next sentence there, men pray to ask God to protect them from their enemies. This is what we're talking about. Instead of praying to ask God to so enlighten them that men can practice the love principle in their human relations and thereby not make enemies. The love principle. So can I invite everyone to put in the chat box the love principle? Can we talk about that phrase for a minute, Ken?
Yeah, love is a word that has not. There's no opposite word for it in our language. That is the only single word we know of that there is no opposite for. That fully encompasses the opposite of what love is. Love says yes. Love says no. Hate just says no. So hate is not the opposite of love. So love is an undividable quality. You can know it, but you can't see it. It's sort of like rhythm, balance, and truth. You can know them. Truth resonates. Lies feel a disconnect. There's a gap in the line. That story doesn't quite make sense. Well, you know you've heard a lie. When you hear the truth, which is what you're hearing in these lessons and the things we're talking about, it resonates. And when it resonates, it polarizes, it motivates, it stimulates. So what they're talking about here is a learn curve too. Love is not something that you just automatically know. It's actually an application, right? To love others, as Jim is talking about. So I can't say I want good things to happen in my life, hate and put fear on people and condemn people and think that good events are going to come into my life. Because of what Jim was talking about, if God's laws and what we read in there about gravity, if God's laws are immutable, we need not get angry. We need not be bitter. We need not find fault with people, because we know if they've done something wrong, God's laws will restore balance. We don't ever have to worry about that. And the seesaw is the exemplification. Without that God's law, we wouldn't have any motion, right? The universe would cease to exist. Remember, it's a creating universe, not a created.
So well said, but I have to say, Deborah, it's cracking me up here in the chat box. I'm loving this. So Karen, please read this comment, because Deborah Manuel says something about that if you want to experience love, go ahead, Karen.
Love equaling carrots. It doesn't make sense to plant tomato seeds and expect to recap carrots. So yeah, there you go.
Yes.
That is funny. So well said. So well said. And Deb Tonkin actually weighs in. Good to see you, Sam. Good to see you, Margie Diane. So Deb Tonkin, let's see what she had to say. It says universal truth, not relative truth. Just had a conversation about that today. Okay. Yes. So let's go into that section in the middle of page 552. I'll just read it and ask the panel to comment. Therefore, we again say to you that when you ask God for anything, never ask him to fulfill his part, for he has already done that, but ask him rather to show you what you should do to fulfill your part. All right, now breathe into this last sentence, because this last sentence is like a little truth bomb. Everything that is wrong with you is of your own making. Therefore, ask that you be enlightened. Okay, so that's a loaded sentence right there. Any comments before we continue?
I do this all the time. All the time. Ask for enlightenment and meditate on it. And that answer does come. It'll come in physical form. You'll see a video, you'll meet a person, they'll throw an idea at you. Clarity comes if you're open and waiting for it. But if you stamp your feet and tell the universe that it's mean, nasty, and doesn't play well with others, you get that back.
Jim, I always like that when it always shows up with a video or a person or something, the answer's there, or sometimes it just, those little angels just whisper in your ears.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Science has actually proven at this point that all ailments come from our brain. They start in our brain before they get in our body. Even a flu that you pick up starts in your brain. That would be the depolarizing effect as opposed to polarized. When you're depolarized, you're more apt to get colds and sickness and illness. When you're polarized, those elements will be shielded from your polarization.
So at the bottom of page 552, and it goes into 553, it talks about the cause of the misconception, asking God to the about the power of prayer. It says the cause of the misconception lies in the fact that people who ask God for fulfillment for their desires forget that requests for material things are created only through two-way action. Material things are not created by rubbing an Aladdin lamp. Wow, that's about 1950s. An Aladdin lamp or through wishful thinking. They are created through balanced action and reaction. So when a mechanic fixes your broken car through knowledge of its working, or surgeon fixes your broken body through knowledge of its working, those operations are as much mind healings as the elimination of toxic poisons from your body by thoughts of love is mind healing. Now, this next section that I've circled and highlighted, I'm going to ask Ken to read it. And this is a really core part of the Russell work. So if we could read that slow, it's in all caps by the Russells. The only way they had to emphasize things back in the 1950s to the typewriter was to put things in all caps and underlined. I'm sure they would have made this a bigger font had they been doing this today. Ken?
Sure. All creations are mind creations. All mind creations have bodies formed in the images of the mind thoughts. All bodies are created perfect by conformity with law and made ill by breach of law, which we just discussed about. Every ailment we have first starts in our brain, or I wouldn't go into mind because that's singular. I would go into brain. The difference between my mind and my brain, I had to learn, is I can weigh my brain, but you cannot weigh your mind. Just like you can't sit in front of a mirror and point to where you, the person is, the person that people know is at in that body that you're sitting in when you look in that mirror. Right. I've yet to meet anybody that can point to where they are at in that body, in their bodies. So, right. We are beyond form. And I think that's where it's going to come in about why we're all one. We read in there, how do we find our oneness? That is actually one of the cards in there, is that if you don't recognize your universal oneness, then you are always going to feel separate and apart. And so I would ask the panel, and I'll propose that to it, and I'll bring in mine. How do we recognize our oneness in this world with all people in it?
Deep communion and meditation.
Okay.
For me, it's recognizing the power of the light, and that it's all comes from the one white light, and that everything is nothing but particles and wave, and we're all part of that sea of those particles, and everything is arranging, rearranging, manifesting, unmanifesting, creating, uncreating.
But our mind is not particles, so that's a little bit misleading there. Kimberly.
No, we are chemistry, which is particles that have to rearrange based on our thoughts.
Okay, we're talking about effect now. We're not talking about cause, right?
Well, that's my answer to it.
Good job,
Okay.
Karen. All right. So where are you going, Ken?
I'm asking you, what is it you're saying?
I didn't hear the question. Forgive me.
In terms of what was said, how do we connect to everybody in this universe? Otherwise, we're always going to feel separate and apart unless we can see the oneness of all human beings as being one.
Well, to me, it goes back to
That's what the
that
card
image that
title said, that when we went to break, that's what it said on the card.
So I would go back to the God is Light poster, the black one that's got the squares. We'll see if we can pull that up. For me, is that we're all connected with that stream of light. And that's the light that I've seen for my entire life. So that's how. You have something you want to add before I continue going on to 554?
You know, I can only tell you the things that have come to me, and that would be exactly what you just said. That was one of them. That the God light that I so recognize in me is the same God light I see in you, and I usually apply that to people that may not be living through that God light. Maybe they are in their sense selves. Maybe they are bad mouthing, dogging, lying, cheating, manipulating, and doing those things that I wouldn't do. But I must remember that does not make me better than them, because we all have the same full potential. And I think that's what Karen referred to when she was saying that white light back to the projector, that we're all centered by the same white light. And that for me, one of the things that helped me to kind of bridge that gap on a physical level is I realized that every human being is a sliver of my personality. Within every human being, I can find a piece of myself, and with every human being, they can find a piece of them in me. Everyone I've ever met, no matter how far away I think from the polar opposites we are, there's always a piece of me that's identical to them and a piece of them that's identical to me. So, and also one of the greatest things I always heard through my lectures is the common things I heard was, oh, I knew when I was a child that I wasn't like other children. And reality of it is, if I ask everybody in the room, who here feels like when they were a child, they were different than other children, everybody in the room raises their hand. And that, I believe, is what makes us all one, is that we think we're different and separate from each other, when reality of it is, that's what makes us one, that we all think that, but that is not the truth.
I wanted to bring up that image, that illustration again, because this is the one that stopped me in my tracks that James just brought up. When I first walked into the museum, this was the one that stopped me, was that whole God is light image. And James, is that easy to pull up again? So if you'll notice the far bottom left hand, you see where the dots of light. So if you could, Jim, describe what this particular scientific drawing of Walter's is.
Well, he's showing our physical connection by light. The background white is us. That's our divine selves, the unexpressed, the universal one, the fulcrum of the wave. Once you move into the dividing between light and dark, now you've got the seesaw handles, going back and forth. Now you're manifesting. And once you start manifesting in light, between light and darkness, you can manifest any concept or idea that you hold on to. The very idea of creation of humanity is a dual concept worked on in the thoughts of the many to manifest this beautiful illusion. Look at the panel in front of us. I've been female. I'm currently male. I've been child. I've been adult. I've been of the black race. I've been of the white race. I've had lifetimes where I did horrible things because I was lost in darkness in my physical self. I've had lifetimes where I've done amazing things. The point is that when you begin to know that your divinity is what you are, that pure white light of your divine is what you are, no matter how far you may have strayed, you always can come back to that. And there's the beautiful promise too. No matter how far you stray, your divinity is always intact and always there to manifest and undo that which you did, the mistakes that you've made.
Well, this particular illustration, when you were talking about cause and effect, for me, I saw those bottom two images on the left. Ever since I was a child, I saw the way everything was connected, people and everything in the universe, as well as that second block on the bottom left. I saw it. And so I would try to describe that to people when I was in my 20s. And of course, they all thought I was nuts. Yeah. They couldn't see it. And so I knew from way back then. And in fact, this is part of what I always was very personally offended by people who would go and talk about other people behind their back. And they would try to get me involved to do the same. And I would say, I'm not doing that. So I will try to mediate and have a conversation between the two of you, but I'm not going to be part of that because I knew that they were just another facet of who we are. And so this is something that I believe many of us know at a heart and soul level, but we lose our way. So talking. Yes, Karen.
No, I
thought you were raising your hand. Okay.
No, but it does remind me of, I always wondered, just exactly what Jim said. If we all knew we've been everything, why would we be fighting each other all the time? And why would we be always because I'm not this or I'm not that, or I don't like you because of this? It would just like, it would erase all of that.
Mm-hmm.
You'd just be having the experience, and maybe you could be kind.
Wouldn't that be nice to actually move into an experience of love? And that's what I think is so powerful about this love principle. I did want to bring up Deb Tonkin, bring up a quote here. Karen, if you would share that.
Deb is up there. Love that which is lovely. Deal gently with that which is imperfectly developed or misdirected.
And you know what? I think that word misdirected is very powerful, Deb. Thank you for bringing that up, because I do hear some people get really harsh on other people. And I'm like, I don't think they were perhaps meaning it that way. Maybe they were misdirected. Maybe it was distorted. Distorted is one of my favorite words there. But I do want to go to something about creation here, is where we've still got a lot of pages to go. It talks about in the middle here of page, let's go on to the top of page 555. It says that stop rather and talk with God, seek him, know him, be him in deep meditation. Seek knowledge through inspiration. That's the only way to build omnipotence into your desire. And if you would, type in omnipotence into the chat box. Seek knowledge through inspiration. Never start anything without inspired knowledge, which puts love into your givings. For that which is called work should be only joyous givings. Wow. Quite a bit here. Quite a bit here. And I wanted to go down, Ken, if you would, to the bottom of page 555. And there's the second paragraph from the bottom where it says,
As
the
long
quote
as
we already,
you feel.
yeah, as long as you feel. Yes.
As long as you feel yourself to be separate, individual person, you will think of God as separate and apart from yourself. Until you can think of yourself as the person or the universal self, God will be nothing, another being whom you may reverence or worship or ask favors from or depend upon in the measure of your knowledge of God.
So
So I think
notice how they put the person in all caps and universal self in all caps. I was wondering if you could comment on that.
Yeah, I think we're talking about what we've just indicated, right? I just said in the mirror, I am not my body, I am my soul. Anybody, human being I've ever asked that to has said the same thing, that they can't point to where they're at in that body. And then I would go in to say, well, when you look at yourself at 95 years old, if you get there, right, are you really going to think your body's who you are? Or is at that point you're going to realize your soul is who you are? And if my soul is who I am, and you cannot weigh my soul, nor can you see my soul, but you can know my soul, well, that's what means that we're all soul. We are all one soul. And that's a really hard concept that gets on a whole nother level. But in these teaching, it is going to be illustrated. There is only one soul, and that's the God soul. Our bodies are not who we are. We are our minds, right? And our minds is where that soul lives.
Well, and that I want to jump down just to keep us on track to the panel. I'm jumping down to page 558 because that ties in exactly to what Ken just said. It's highlighted in yellow. It says the great fallacy of such a belief, referring to that, is that the fact that man's body is not man. Man is mind, all caps. I mean, capital letter. And invite an idea of mind, an idea with a spiritual entity. That is what God made perfect. And it is quite true that there can be no imperfection in the spiritual eternal man. So is that saying, Jim, that in effect we really are all perfect?
Yes, always have been, always will be, and we will eventually manifest that perfection in body.
And then the man,
perfect
woman ideal.
manifestation of body. That's what we're out to build. Many of us don't reach this stage of evolution in a single lifetime. It can take hundreds of lifetimes. But this is the goal. This is the God-centered, God-aware, I and my Father are one state of being. That's the perfect body. From this to this. God on manifested, God manifested. They'll touch on this a lot as we go on into the science.
All right, so hold up the Cuban sphere. Ken, I know you want to comment. So the Cuban sphere, we're going to be talking about that in the upcoming unit. So for those of you that want to collect your toys so you can learn as we go along, a cube and a sphere is something that you want to have handy. Ken, what were you going to comment?
I was just making note of the fact that we are not our bodies again. And so therefore, anytime we use physical form, that cube that Jim is hanging on to there, in this message are invisible zero planes of curvature. So it's not form, even though it represents the idea of form, right? So what he's talking about in his right hand, which is the sphere, is form. And his left hand is the cube windows that create form. But those cube windows cannot be seen or sensed by the senses of man. Matter of fact, science.
This is illusion.
There you go. Science.
Say that again.
One of the things about
reality.
science.
This is illusion.
Okay, so then, and Kimberly, who's got the other box, so you can point back in, because Jim, if you take the cube and you move it, keep the cube. If you keep the cube and you move it in different angles, then when you look inside the box, you will see that it actually, as mirrors, is nothing but the mirrors, but it's not just a square. It actually becomes six-pointed. And and then there becomes the mirror of light of the universe in this endless repeating points of light, which is exactly the same kind of picture, if you can imagine, that James was showing with all those different points of light within the cube.
The illusion of infinite possibility.
That's it.
And it is an illusion. Yes.
Within the
Remember, the key word there is motion. If you move it, then you got to move it to see what you're talking about, right? If you don't move it, you see one still light.
Okay. Yes.
and actually it would show
Censoring the
you
image.
in a particular paradigm, and when you don't actually take any action or any movement, that's different. You're just going to stay paralyzed in a particular point of view.
Yes.
Well, that's what we're talking about. Yeah, you've got a manifest idea. That's a physical action.
Right.
All right, so that is quite a heated conversation. A lot to be said there. It is time for our next break. So for those of you that are just tuning in, I know this is a lot of information. Just let it wash over, because we're not teaching new information. We're waking up to what you deep down already know at a soul level. Please for your 3 minutes. Stand up, decentrate. We'll see you in 3. You are within earshot. If you will slowly begin to find your way back, please. So we do this broadcast every Sunday night as our gift to all of you, and quite frankly, a gift to ourselves. I'll be honest with you. Those of us on the panel find that we love this. Karen, I see you adamantly shaking your head yes. I look forward to every Sunday night.
Yes.
It cements things in there that you haven't thought, or punctuates things that maybe you need. So I think for me, since I've never done the course before, sometimes you get, again, those like the ahas, just like Susan.
Ahas. Well, and that's what I wanted to tie in here. So Bonnie just chimed in. She said, oh my, the light bulb just went on. So that was good news. And Susan, so glad to see you here tonight. Susan says, helpful paradigm. Thanks for helping me understand. So whoever you're watching on the screen, whoever is on our panel that particular week, you are finding a group of people that are dedicated to coming up with ever image and visual and explanation and real life application to make this as real as possible. So with the panel's permission, I'm going to skip down to the bottom of page 564. We still have a lot to cover, and this is in light of what we were just talking about, and it talks about bodies are chemical machines. Okay, so because this is important as it ties into the physical, and I believe that we all know that we have such a high rate of physical issues and health issues that this is important. So Jim, I'm going to ask if you could to read those two paragraphs underneath bodies are chemical machines.
All vegetable and animal bodies are mechanical instruments which are made for the sole purpose of manifesting God through action. That is all that bodies do. They do nothing else than express the actions of their centering mind, which motivates their actions. Bodies are composed of light waves. One half of every wave is concentrative and centripetal.
Centripetal.
Yeah, it is thus polarized in the positive direction of increasing vitality. It is the builder of bodies. Positive polarity multiplies power in the measure of the desire of the mind to express action. Positive polarity expresses life. That's
Okay.
really beautifully put. Yeah.
It is beautifully said, and it's important because it ties into what I'm going to ask Ken to read in the next particular section. But right quick, I'm going to ask everybody to please put in the chat box, positive polarity expresses life. Positive polarity expresses life. So when we look at all of the health problems that we all face, all of the mental illnesses that we have in the world, all of the psychiatric, all of the everything, all the meds, everything that people are struggling with, all of the addictions, it's because of what we're getting ready to go into. But right now, positive polarity expresses life. Please remember that phrase. Ken, if you could go on to the next part of the wave, though, those next 3 paragraphs describe what happens on the other side of this. Other half of the wave at the top of page 565.
Okay, the other half of the wave is decentrative and centrifugal. It is thus depolarized in the direction of decreasing vitality. Depolarization expresses death. One half of every wave, likewise, is alkaline in its chemistry. The alkaline elements are positive and multiply vitality in the direction which express life. They compress in the direction of the equator, which centers the spectrum. That's back to the fulcrum. The other half of the wave is acid in its chemistry. The acid elements are likewise positive, but expand towards the 2 blue ends of the spectrum.
All right, so I'm going to read this next part. For every acid element, there is a balancing alkaline one. Both are necessary, but each must always balance the other. Else the body is thrown out of balance and becomes ill or develops the destructive growths and malignancies, which are so rapidly increasing in the unnatural lives of great cities. All right, so this is scientifically explaining the issue of balance, and I wanted to bring up this issue of acid and alkaline because this is what I discovered when I went back and I lost my weight, that my body was too acidic and that I had no understanding of this issue of balance. And that's part of why so many people who are with me in my life know that I drink a lot of fresh vegetable juice because I'm always working to try to bring my body into an alkaline state. I found that that was an optimum issue, and I've had almost no health issues at all over the past 15 years because of it. I had a knee replacement and that's it. Knee replacements and that's it, because that was an effect of what I had done to my body from before. But when you go down to the brackets on that same bottom of the page 565, it says the emotions which express happiness, joy, ecstasy, love, and good will polarize the body positively in the direction which expresses life. So let me ask everyone on the chat box. Let's just have a moment of vulnerability, shall we? Think about this week. I know the holidays is a tough week to ask, but this week, what percentage of your life, of your thought life, was actually spent in this positive, polarizing in a positive body in a positive way? What percentage of your life was at happiness, joy, ecstasy, love, and goodwill? Anybody on the panel want to dive in there with a moment of vulnerability first?
Most days about 85% for me.
Okay. I would say I was around 75%.
I'd say it would be about 75, 80. I had fun this time. I actually took one of the Walter Russell quotes. And so even when I got up to do the Christmas dinner for everybody, it's like, I've got to do a perfect day. Just like, the prelude talked about.
And it's great about saying that.
thought, okay, I'm just going to make it as perfect as I can. And that was my mantra for the day. And it was fun. So, yeah.
Ken?
I would say, remember, perfection lies in whenever any moment you're feeling exceedingly content and fulfilled. And for me, I had a very content and fulfilling holiday, quite frankly. And it wasn't about what I got. It, quite frankly, was who I spent it with. And then the energy in that environment of the person that I do spend my time with and the people that I choose to spend time with today are polarizing to my life. They're life-giving, and we share the energy of love. Remember, if you want to be like God, all you have to do is enter into a love state, and you are one with God. God only has one emotion, and that's love. God doesn't feel grief, sorrow. Those are all divided emotions. That's why there is no opposite to love. That's because love in itself is so dynamic. So if you want to access the God mind, anytime you're just feeling good, like, I feel kind of sparkly today, you are one with God. You and God are one in that moment that you are feeling that ecstasy. Ecstasy is defined as exceedingly content and fulfilled.
That was one of the very first conversations Ken and I ever had when he explained that definition to me. And I bring this up and I asked the chat box for an answer because, and for those of you that don't put one, it's okay. This is part of the journey of what the human journey is about, because the emotions at the bottom of page 565, it says this: the emotions which express anger, fear, worry, jealousy, cynicism, or hatred depolarizes the body in the direction which expresses death. And so when you think about that, that's really why I believe, Jim, the matrix works so hard to keep us in those emotions, because it wants us to be in that point of depolarizing the body and depolarizing.
It wants to drive you out of reason and love and into fear and hatred, divisionary thinking.
Now, so whenever you see the letter Q there, it's Q for quote, reminding me that that's a good quote to bring up. And in that yellow highlight, it says, the more we reflect the ecstatic conditions of God's mind, this is what Ken was just talking about, the more we vitalize our bodies, prolong our lives, and lengthen their maturing points. Wow. Wow.
And that's not hard to achieve. When I pet my dog, I get a sense of ecstasy. There's a moment of expressing love. I love my puppy so much. When I pet her and I shed love in her, I am in a perfect moment. I never pet my dog and think, I could use a cheeseburger shake and maybe some fries right now. I'm petting my dog. It's like or I'm loving on my girl right there. And when I'm loving on my girl, I don't think, I got to put air in the tires and I got to get new rims and things like that. I'm thinking purely of how much I appreciate her presence in my life. Appreciation is a great insulator and a great state of the love. Love is an appreciative state.
Ken does that very, very well. I am guilty of sometimes thinking about what else needs to happen. So I am learning to live more in that present moment. And that's something for all of us, I believe. I did have to chuckle, though. And this particular Q&A wasn't the typical student and answers. I want to show Bonnie's comment. Bonnie, you were cracking me up. She said, if Karen, if you'll share that.
I'd say every time I made myself aware of where my balance was, I was 100%. If not, I had to do it by making fudge and being
All right, there we go. So I did have to chuckle. On page 568, for some of us, we're actually carrying on generational issues. And I won't read all of this, but they were mentioning about the fact of, when we talked about the sins of our mothers, the sins of our grandmothers, they were talking about when women wore corsets, that it was a barbarous invention. Hundreds of thousands of women descendants of these tight-lacing ancestors have suffered great and unnecessary agony in giving birth to children because of the sins of their mothers. And it talks about in that last paragraph, it says, when you tell these women that God made them perfect and all they have to do is see themselves perfect and remind God that he has perhaps overlooked them and letting something so hurtful happen to their bodies, you're forgetting that God did not do the tight lacing which caused these agonies your grandmothers did. I was like, wow, talk about, that's that generational issue, isn't it?
That's the unbalances of that's the unbalances. I think in the Bible it says something about the sins of the parents will be passed on to the fourth generation. Yes.
Well, and so what was interesting here is that I believe a lot of us right now living in this incarnation, we are here to clear up so many of the imbalances. And so for those of you that are watching us, perhaps you're not even sure why you're watching us. You simply tune in because you like the vibration, you like the words, you like the Russell work. You're not really sure about the Russell work, but you think we're interesting. Whatever the reason it is that you're here. Is the fact that, Ken just came off of a surgery 9 weeks ago from a hip replacement surgery. So it's a challenge for him to even sit at times if you see him grimace. That we're actually living through cleaning up a number of these generational imbalances. I sincerely believe that. Karen, your thought?
You know what? I was thinking it was a bunch of us women were sitting around talking about how during our generation, we were the first women out there in the workforce. And when we did that, and it was also the first time that you ever went to a psychologist or you ever went to a self-help something. It's the first generation that we have, so I'm 69, that we had the opportunity to self-examine our family patterns and actually as a collective, as a family, which we do, discuss it. Oh, you're doing mom, you're doing dad. You might want to stop that. That's a repeating pattern. I mean, we're actually able to do that. So,
well, and it's a gift. It's a gift. As I've told my daughter is 27 years old. I've told her, our previous generations, all they had were the people around them. And so if the people around them were in difficult, dysfunctional patterns, they rarely had an opportunity to get out. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have psychiatrists. They didn't have self-help books. They didn't have, so we have to remember that we are living in this beautiful time. I believe that for those of us that are willing to do the work, that we can assist in healing a whole generational line. Which I found very powerful. Jim?
Yes, we literally are. And living a positive and loving life is one of the ways that we have the most control over doing that. And accepting that generations that preceded you are also on an evolutionary growth scale. So they've got their pluses and their minuses. And as we're looking at the minuses that we're handed, let's not forget to look at the pluses. I was born with a very strong and healthy body because not everybody in my prior generations abused their bodies. There were enough that did not, they
did not. Right.
Right. Plus I bring my own thought patterns into this body in this lifetime. And also when you look at people that are in families, many people come into families who are much more evolved souls for the very purpose and function to change that polarity. And they're willing to take that load on. I used to say to Ken all the time because of his childhood, you chose to take a deep dive into a very dirty pond so that you could grow and learn the things you've learned and uplift them. And so don't underestimate what we are giving of ourselves just by being in body.
So let's remind everybody of that who's listening, that perhaps you are the one who is actually healing that. And you're being here and listening to these words and drinking in what it is that the lessons, the words that we have here from Walter and Leo Russell. We're actually broadcasting. I know I'm broadcasting from the studio that's here at the Russell Museum in Waynesboro, Virginia. Ken is actually there by Walter and Leo's personal library on the other side of the building. And so I'm very grateful for their work because I think it gives us all a chance to rewire. And so as we go into the conclusion, which is the last 4 pages now, I am on page 569. The conclusion says, God is love. The foundation of love is balance. And so if you could type in the chat box, please, the foundation of love is balance. All caps there. The foundation.
There's a great exemplification of why hate is not the counter to love, because hate is not balanced, it's imbalanced.
And it talks about how when man learns to balance, now everyone just drink this in, when man learns to balance all of his human relations and all of his human emotions, he will have a perfectly balanced body. Normal bodies are balanced. Everyone may have as balanced and as normal a body as he is able to practice the principles of balance from the moment to moment of his life. If you could keep in balance all that God has already given you, you would never have any illnesses of the body whatsoever, for it would be impossible. God's balance laws are always fulfilled with balanced manifestations. It could not be otherwise. And so I wrote down the phrase right there, what if, because I had a moment. I'd like to dream. I like to think about the new world, the new earth that I believe that many of us are bringing forth. And I have a little, I've just started a little invention journal of what I would like to see in this new earth. Lots of different inventions to create. And so as I work on how do I bring that desire forth, I had a question that came glaring into me as I was studying today. And I wanted to ask us all to think about this and meditate over the next week. What if tomorrow we woke up and we had a different body? Just play a little game with me. Humor, Kimberly Faith, right here. What if we woke up tomorrow? Would we now have sufficient knowledge and wisdom to be able to keep that body in balance? Would we, with what
remember, the only thing I would say to that is if we read in this home study course, you're going to read that grief and suffering are just as important as happiness and joyness in this world of duality.
Sure.
We live in a world of duality. That's the three-dimensional experience. So in that
Sure.
duality, we have there's important to both feelings, just like in it's related to the play of creation. So when you think of a play or of a movie, right, you think of, you got your good characters and your bad characters. Well, when the writers were, as a writer, I know this, when you're writing about the characters, the bad guy dying doesn't make you go rah 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 as you're writing the script, and the good guy getting injured doesn't make you go, oh no, I can't believe he's hurt, because it's all part of that drama of the play that you're writing. So they have equal balance, just like shadows. Which is more important in a painting, the shadows or the colors, right? They're both equally important to create balance. And that's the world of duality that we live in. So it is balance to have, not always be in an ecstatic state. So I don't want to mislead people to think that we're always supposed to be bubbly little sparkling.
No. That's not the game I was playing. I completely appreciate that. There's certainly opportunity in both. But I did have to ask an honest question, is that if we did have a reset, if we did have a new opportunity, would we make choices? Do we have sufficient wisdom to be in balance and take ourselves to another octave? I'm simply laying that out there for interesting conversation.
I'm going to tell you, I'm pretty good, but I'm not perfect. No matter how much I wish to be.
I would need to take myself for a walk a little more often.
There you go. You get it?
I need somebody to push on me and take me out.
It's loving acceptance of change. There are things I cannot do in my 70s that I could do in my 20s. So I could lament and be angry that I can't do things like I did in my 20s, or I can look at what I can do and go and proceed to go after that. So I'm not going to, I used to run 5 miles a day. I'm not going to run 5 miles a day. I don't think I could run around the block. But I still have the joy and memory of that time period.
I guarantee you could not run around the block.
We'll put you to the test next time.
I was going to say, he can't hobble half the block, Jim.
Yeah.
So let's go on down here to the bottom of page 570. And they obviously had, this is very important, and because they had it in a big box here, and it says the supreme purpose of creation. So we'll scroll down to the box. And it says this. It says God created his dynamic universe for the sole purpose of manifesting the one idea of love, which constitutes his being, and human extensions of his being who slowly and gradually become aware of their oneness of identity with him. Notice that oneness is capitalized.
Kim, could you read that sentence again?
Okay.
Who slowly and gradually become aware of their oneness and their identity with him. This is where we get out of balance. When we want to have absolute oneness with Creator right now, it's like the joke we've used before. God, please give me patience right now. No, earn it.
For this reason, every human on earth is perpetually seeking God, whether he knows it or not. For untold ages, man has sought God outside of himself. The human race is just beginning to become aware that when it does find God, he will be found within man. It is to this end that this new knowledge of the long hidden secrets of space is now given here in order that man will be enabled to transcend himself and his works for the betterment of the whole human race. Any commentary for that?
Yeah, I would like to say something. Remember, you're on an earth that is in fact refolding. You're getting warmth and light from a sun that is dying in principle. It is going to come to a death. It may take millions and billions of years, but it is definitely going to rescend one point to become a black hole. Just the same thing with everything that we're living in. Is there comes an idea of this play of creation when the man-woman idea has reached its pinnacle, which is for Christ consciousness to be permeating every man and every woman. And I believe that's similar to loving everybody the same way we love our children, which is the best way I could correlate unconditional love to. That then we will have achieved that idea, and there is an end coming, right? You have to think about it. The earth is going to end, so the idea of man woman is going to come to its fruition. So we're either going to make it or we're going to break it.
All right, a lot to be said for that. So as we get ready to go down here to page 572, I wanted to go to where the green circle was, because we do have a visual journey here for you this evening. And it says, the most wonderful things in all the world is within every man. The genius knows it, for he is close to it. The mystic knows it better, for he has touched the hem of it. The cosmic thinker is reaching out eagerly for that kingdom of heaven and the light which that wonderful thing is. All mankind has known of it within his heart from the beginning and started his search for it way back in the dark eons. But many are now opening the door wider and wider, which leads to a new dwelling place. The real dwelling place of man, who has for such long ages thought his body was his dwelling place. So I wanted to pause for just a moment, and I was going to ask James to bring up the Awaken logo. And for those of you that we wanted to describe to you why there is a door in that logo, and it goes back to this specific section, doesn't it, Karen? When we're talking about opening, there, opening the door wider and wider to cosmic knowledge, right?
Yep. And then you have the yin and the yang, and the male and the female.
The masculine and the feminine, absolutely. So every time that you see the logo, please know that you're welcome to go order the home study course at awakenyourgenius.com. We'll put a link there. And we work closely with the museum and the University of Science and Philosophy as we're partnering with them. And actually, when it talks about, the cosmic thinker, it just reminded me that whenever you see the logo, and especially in the opening of every show, start paying attention to every single time that you will see that logo in motion, because a great deal of time, effort, and love was poured into that. Was it not, team?
Yes. Kim, can I read a brief sentence?
Please.
I may have read this before, but I don't think it can be read enough. This is a quote from Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Neither a lofty degree of intelligence nor imagination, nor both together, go to the making of genius. Love, love, love. That is the soul of genius.
Wow.
You gotta love what you do. You pour yourself into it, and it brings you utter bliss and joy.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Any final comments, Ken, before we go to the visual journey? You're on mute.
I was saying I love golf, but sometimes it's so damn frustrating, Karen. I don't know what the hell, man. I'm a little conflict there, but no, love, love, love. And that is the great insulator from anything and protects you from everything. And sometimes, love is to grieve, and love is to also know joy and fullness. And that doesn't have anything to do with ecstasy, right? Ecstasy is to be exceedingly content and fulfilled. That is a state of being also. We can always enjoy those perfect moments. And I encourage people, cooking is perfection. If you like to work in your workshop and you're tooling wood, that you do it with love, you're doing it with perfection. You're feeling ecstasy. You're healing your body every time you do anything with love, whether it's cooking, doing your dishes, washing your car, or creating a masterpiece and so forth. That's always, again, what you just read on Mozart. That was really good, Jim, about what Mozart said.
On the end of page 573 here, before I ask Karen what we're going to be looking at for the visual journey, I wanted to mention just a few words from Walter and Leo, but just out of gratitude for the words that they share with us. You'll see where I have it bracketed in yellow. Go up just a little bit, James. It says, go up just a little bit, James, to the brackets. It says, we want you to live in God's universe. So this is Walter and Leo's message to you today. We want you to live in God's universe and look out from its light into its divided extensions when you will, and thus looking out to find them wonderful and good, reflecting the glory of the light of their source strongly here, weakly there, but all of it being good. For all are seeking that door which you have found. All are seeking that door which you have found, and some are near enough for you to reach forth your hand and help them over the threshold. They certainly have more to say there. Please know we do our best to cover as much as possible. Look forward to hearing from all of you as we continue to go into these different lessons. Next time it is Unit 8, but for right now, to wrap up today, our last episode of 2024. Karen, what are we going to see in the visual journey we're about to enjoy?
This one takes us not back to this one, but the last one we did, which had a lot more science in it, which talked about the compression. It talks about the light spectrum, the heat, and also how we're in a body, but not, it's kind of, so you see, and if I invite, because we've got some toys, so that at the end, if anybody wants to go back and play with the toys and kind of explain a little bit more, that's fine, because it's not my usual pretty one, but I've had company nonstop this month. So
we're thankful for whatever gift you give us, Karen.
It's a little bit of at least some insight. So a little bit of humor, maybe, who knows? So let's keep
All right. Sit back and enjoy the conclusion of the visual journey and see what the universe says to you. I don't hear So again, another lovely visual journey. Thank you so much, Karen. Everybody is once again on mute if you'll unmute yourself. So want to say a gracious thank you. And if you have any questions, feel free to place them in the chat box as we're wrapping up here. That was the wrap up of Unit 7. And so this is the unit that we carry around with us and we study from. And a very, very powerful experience. Any final thoughts from the panel before I say our few final comments here for our broadcast? All right, the panel's been working very hard, so let me just go ahead and move into this. So we are here at the end of 2024, and I had to chuckle because thinking about this lesson, I've had a practice every New Year's Eve for the past 20 years, whether I was by myself or whether I was with others, but I actually have a journal where every single New Year's Eve for the past 20 years, I've written down all that was good that happened in the past year and all that was challenging that happened in the past year. And what's really fun is every New Year's Eve, I go back and I actually read through the previous 15, 20 years to remind me. And it's so interesting to see that sometimes what you thought was bad turned out to be good and vice versa. And it just reminded me that perhaps I was seeking balance even back then. So as we wrap up 2024, we want to say a gracious thank you to all of you that have been joining us. You are to the end of Unit 7. Can we just have an applause for everybody who has been on this journey with us here, that you are over halfway. We have only 5 units left. That's a big deal. So truly, and that's a really big deal for all of you that have been sticking with this. We're now going into Unit 8 as of in January. That'll be our next broadcast, the first Sunday in 2025. And I wanted to pause for a moment and I wanted to thank philosophy.org and the team that's been working with us. And for those of you that want a little more interaction, be sure to check out their events page. You can see some of the events that they sponsor. But more importantly, go check out their store. You can actually order copies of any of the illustrations yourself to have at home. Especially that God is Light poster, which might be very, very important to you. Feel free to put in the code AWAKEN10. But I want to finalize by saying a thank you to everyone who's on the panel. So definitely to the people who are here on the screen, to Jim and to Ken and to Karen. So Jim, you have had an incredible year, and I know it has been a challenge. And we end this year being very, very grateful for Jackie's presence and her legacy that continues. And thank you for the love that you continue to pour into this. Karen, every single week you come shining through for us. And I'm so grateful for your love for what we're trying to do here. And I want the love that you give to everybody else and playing with all the things that you play with for us. To Ken, there are no words of what it is that I can say to you. You are my co-creator in this entire idea. He's the one who came up with the idea and I helped manifest it with him. And it has been a gracious and joyful journey. And to our other panelists who have been with us for 2024, a gracious thank you. Margaret Rube has joined us occasionally, has been just such an incredible blessing. John Bonzel, as I'm grateful for the role that he has played on our journey over the past year. And of course, please just join me in remembering Jackie Porter as well. So while we lost her through her illness, her legacy will continue on forever. And so in 2024, I simply want to express much love and much gratitude for the fact that everyone cared enough to do this every Sunday night for a solid year now, and for all of you that joined us. And who knows what 2025 is going to bring forth for humanity. And it is my deep, deep hope and joy that we will look forward to a world that is even better than ever. And the way we can do that is to keep turning the lights on.
Honey, so, you're having a perfect moment.
A gracious thank you to everyone. May we continue to plant the seeds for a better humanity for all. We won't say goodbye. We're going to say until next time. See you next Sunday, 2025.